The way you speak to a man reveals far more than your words. It reveals whether you are ruled by fear or led by peace. And a man, even if he doesn't understand why, feels the difference. This talk is not about technique or tricks. It's about returning to the core of your being and letting your presence, your energy, your silence, your inner peace do the speaking. When a woman is grounded, clear, and emotionally still, she becomes undeniable. She doesn't chase connection. She commands it without saying a word too much. In a world obsessed with talking, a high-value woman speaks like a mountain breeze only when necessary and always from stillness. What if your power was not in how much you say, but in how little you need to? There is a quiet strength in a woman who speaks from her center rather than from her wounds. You can hear it not just in her words, but in the calm behind them. Her voice doesn't shake with the need to be understood or defended. It doesn't seek validation or vengeance. Its simply is clear, composed, and grounded like still water that reflects everything around it without losing its form. Most women have been taught to speak from pain without even realizing it. In relationships, this often appears as reactivity. A man forgets a small detail, and suddenly she's raising her voice, not just about the forgotten moment, but about the many layers of past hurt. That moment triggered, she thinks she's expressing herself, but what she's really doing is echoing old wounds that were never witnessed or healed. This reaction may feel powerful in the moment, but it rarely creates connection. It creates confusion. It creates distance. To speak from your center is a different path. It means your words are not drawn from unhealed parts of you. They arise from your awareness, from your ability to witness your own emotions rather than being swept away by them. And this is where true communication begins. When a woman can feel the fire inside her and yet respond from stillness, not flame. Modern neuroscience supports this subtle art. The amygdala, the part of your brain that processes fear and emotional intensity, is often activated in moments of perceived relational threat, especially when early experiences of abandonment, betrayal, or dismissal are triggered. But the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, regulation, and conscious choice, can step in if we've trained ourselves to pause, to breathe, to return to the body before returning to the conversation. This is not repression, this is refinement. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing how you feel. It is about giving yourself the space to see clearly what you're feeling before you act upon it. Imagine you are standing in a storm. The average person reacts to the wind, but the wise one waits to see where the wind is blowing from. A woman once shared her story about confronting her partner after sensing emotional withdrawal. She used to lash out, texting paragraphs, blaming, demanding closeness. But one day after much self-work, she did something different. She waited. She asked herself, is this really about him, or is this an old story of rejection playing itself again? After hours of silent self-inquiry, she simply said to him later that evening, I feel distance between us. I'd like to understand if something is on your mind. That simple centered sentence changed the course of their relationship. No argument, no drama, just clarity, and in that space he opened. This is the power of speaking from your center. When your voice carries no fear, it invites trust. When your words are not tainted by emotional chaos, they hold weight. A woman rooted in her center doesn't speak to control outcomes. She speaks to reveal her presence. But few realize the most powerful form of communication doesn't even begin with speaking. It begins with silence. In a world where women are often taught to over-explain, justify, convince, and soften the truth of who they are in order to be light, the power of silence can feel radical. But it is in the pause before we speak that we locate our real power. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. Most speak to escape the discomfort of presence. But the high-value woman does not fear the quiet. She embraces it. When a man speaks, she does not interrupt. She does not immediately react. She lets his words land. She lets silence do the work before she does. And it's in that moment of stillness where nothing is being said, that everything is being communicated. This stillness is not passivity, it's intentional restraint, and from a neurological standpoint, it shows strength. The ability to pause before responding activates the vagus nerve, calming the entire nervous system and opening access to your higher cognitive functions. It allows you to be discerning instead of defensive, curious rather than combative. Men feel this. They may not be able to articulate it, but they feel when a woman is not rushing to fill the void, not anxiously trying to fix, explain, or please. They feel her presence like a steady flame, and that steadiness draws them in. It signals that she is not emotionally dependent on them to be okay, that she does not need performance from him to regulate her own inner weather. There's a story of a man who once said that the most unforgettable woman he ever met was the quietest. She didn't flirt loudly, she didn't brag, she didn't even smile excessively, but when she spoke, everyone listened, not because she said much, but because everything she said had the weight of someone who thought deeply and felt even deeper. Her pauses held more tension than most people's speeches. Her silences were filled with self-possession. This is the art of letting silence speak first. It is the space where you meet your own emotions before sharing them with another. It is the moment where you examine your own energy before entering a room or a conversation. It is not the absence of words. It is the presence of wisdom. A woman who uses this space, who knows how to befriend silence, never chases connection. She lets it unfold. She doesn't perform vulnerability to be liked, nor does she withhold truth to be safe. She simply waits for the right moment, and when she speaks, her words feel like medicine, not noise, not demand, but insight. To move from reactivity to presence, from chaos to clarity, from noise to essence. That is the silent training of a woman becoming truly powerful. When she no longer needs to speak from her wounds and no longer fears the silence between her words, she becomes magnetic without effort. She becomes a mirror and men feel seen in her reflection. They feel safer, they slow down, they soften, they become more honest, and it is in that energy, not in persuasion or perfection, that real intimacy begins to form. To truly connect with a man, a woman must first release the need to react and instead develop the capacity to reflect. Reaction is fast, it's often loud, it's emotionally charged, but reflection is slow. It is spacious, it carries a different frequency, one that invites closeness rather than conflict. Many relationships falter not because of what was said, but because of how quickly it was said. The space between what you feel and what you speak determines the quality of every connection you enter. A woman grounded in reflection listens differently. She doesn't listen just for the facts or the timeline. She listens with her whole body. She tunes into the tone, the breath, the spaces between a man's words. She notices when he speaks fast and when he avoids eye contact. She is not hunting for proof. She is attuning to presence. And through this attunement, something unexpected happens. The man softens. Most men are not used to being truly heard. They are used to being interrogated, interrupted, or immediately analyzed. In such environments, they withdraw. They give surface-level responses. They protect their vulnerability with distraction or indifference. But when a man encounters a woman who reflects rather than reacts, his nervous system senses safety. He may not have language for it, but he will feel it deeply. It's in the way she holds silence without tension, in the way she waits for his thought to finish without racing to correct it. Her stillness says, "I am here not to judge you, but to witness you." Psychology has long acknowledged the power of active listening, yet beyond the clinical language lies a deeper truth. Human beings don't change when they are told what to do. They change when they feel seen. And a woman who listens from stillness allows a man to see himself. She becomes a mirror, not a critic, a container, not a controller. There's a story of a couple struggling with recurring tension. The woman always felt like her partner wasn't emotionally available. He, on the other hand, felt like nothing he did was ever good enough. Their conversations often ended in raised voices and withdrawal, but something shifted when she decided to stop reacting. The next time he came home and seemed distant, She didn't ask why he was cold. She didn't demand reassurance. She simply sat beside him, placed a warm hand on his shoulder, and said, "You seem heavy today. I won't ask you to explain, but I'm here when you're ready." That small moment filled with presence and not pressure melted years of guardedness. He cried for the first time in years, not because she said something brilliant, but because she gave him space to feel. This is the sacred offering of reflection. It doesn't seek to fix, it seeks to feel. It doesn't compete to be right, it opens the door to be real. A high-value woman knows that a reaction might satisfy her ego, but reflection nourishes the relationship, and in that nourishment, both people grow. From this place of deep listening, true dialogue can emerge, but not all conversations hold power. Some are quoted with convenience and performance. Others, rare ones, reveal the soul, and it is here that the high-value woman brings her next gift, asking questions that touch the soul. Not every woman knows how to speak to a man's heart, but the ones who do ask questions that aren't about control, they are about curiosity. They don't ask, "Why didn't you call me?" They ask, "What happens inside you when you start to feel close to someone?" They don't ask, "Where do you see this going?" They ask, "When do you feel most at peace in a relationship?" These questions do something unusual. They bypass performance and go straight to presence. They pull a man out of his rehearsed stories and into deeper waters, and it's in those waters that trust is born. Neuroscience supports this. Deep emotional questions activate the default mode network of the brain, a system associated with introspection, self-reflection, and emotional memory. When these circuits are engaged, a person is more likely to feel empathy, attachment, and resonance. In other words, soul-level questions create brain-level bonding, but asking these questions is not enough. They must come from a genuine place, not a strategic one. A woman must first embody emotional depth to invite it in another. She must have asked herself these questions before offering them to someone else. Otherwise, they become tools of manipulation rather than bridges of intimacy. One woman once shared how her entire connection with a man shifted in a single evening. They had been seeing each other casually surface-level conversations, flirtations, nothing too deep. But one night, sitting across from him, she asked quietly, "What did you need most as a boy that you never received?" The room went silent, his posture changed, his breath deepened. For the first time, he looked at her with something other than charm. He looked at her with truth. That night, their relationship crossed into sacred territory, not because of timing or chemistry, but because she had asked a question that reached behind his defenses. This kind of communication doesn't happen accidentally. It is cultivated. It is the result of a woman who has become still enough within herself that she no longer fears depth. She welcomes it. She knows that a relationship built on convenience may feel fun, but a relationship built on truth will feel free. Men often conditioned to be emotionally stoic need permission to open, and permission is rarely given through words alone. It is given through tone, through curiosity, through the absence of judgment, and most of all, through the presence of a woman who values soul over spectacle. When a woman reflects rather than reacts, she becomes rare. When she asks questions that touch the soul, she becomes unforgettable. She no longer engages in conversations to control the narrative. She engages to reveal the truth, and it is in that truth that both people are transformed. Words alone are never what truly reach a man. It is not just what you say, but the energy that carries your words, the calm or chaos within your breath, the openness or contraction in your posture, the softness or sharpness of your gaze. This subtle field of energy, unspoken yet deeply felt, shapes how a man receives you in every interaction. A woman is communicating not only through her language, but through her entire nervous system. When a woman speaks with embodied energy, her words carry presence. They land, they leave a trace. This is not about being loud or overly expressive. In fact, quite the opposite. The most powerful women often speak quietly, but their words are backed by an inner stillness that commands attention. This stillness is cultivated, not gifted. It is the result of emotional clarity and a deeply rooted sense of self-worth. She does not speak to be heard. She speaks because she knows she carries something worth sharing. Physiologically, this phenomenon is linked to the coherence between heart and brain rhythms. When a woman is centered, when her breath is slow, her thoughts are clear, and her body relaxed, she emits a field of energy that others can feel. Studies in bioenergetics and the polyagal theory confirm that humans unconsciously attune to the emotional states of those around them. A regulated nervous system can soothe another even without a single word being spoken. This is why some women walk into a room and immediately change the atmosphere, not by what they do, but by how they carry themselves. Imagine a conversation between a woman and a man where tension is beginning to build. Words are escalating. He seems defensive, closed off. In this moment, most people would meet that energy with equal resistance. But a woman trained in her own awareness might do something completely unexpected. Instead of pushing forward, she pauses, she breathes, she adjusts her posture to openness, she lowers her voice, she slows her pace, and suddenly the entire emotional dynamic shifts. He mirrors her, he relaxes. He begins to hear again, not because she changed her words, but because she changed her energy. One woman once shared how this shift transformed her relationship. Her partner had become distant and cold, and their conversations felt mechanical. She would try to connect, but he remained unavailable. Then, rather than speaking from frustration, she began approaching him with gentle energy, staying grounded in her body, softening her voice, letting silence stretch longer than usual. One evening, she sat across from him, looked into his eyes without speaking, and simply smiled, not with expectation, but with presence. After a long silence, he exhaled and said, "I don't know what just happened, but I suddenly feel like I can talk to you again." That evening, they shared their most vulnerable conversation in months. Words can invite connection, but it is your energy that creates the space for truth to arrive. A woman who knows how to regulate her nervous system becomes a sanctuary, not a storm. For the man she engages with, she doesn't need to convince or chase. Her very presence is enough. This same woman, when faced with disrespect, confusion, or inconsistency, does not need to react emotionally or prove herself. She sets boundaries calmly without the need for noise or justification. And this brings us to a deeper form of communication. The communication that exists in silence, in clarity, in unshakable dignity. A woman who values herself does not argue her worth. She does not repeat herself multiple times to be taken seriously. She does not over-explain her standards. She states her truth once with clarity and grace, and then allows the world to respond. If a man meets her with alignment, she opens. If he meets her with resistance or games, she steps back, not out of anger but out of principle. In relationships, boundaries are often misunderstood. Many people think of them as ultimatums or defenses, but true boundaries are quiet declarations of self-respect. They are less about controlling others and more about honoring your own peace. When spoken from a grounded place, they don't create distance. They create respect. A woman once recalled the moment she learned this lesson. Early in her relationship, her partner had a pattern of withdrawing emotionally whenever conflict arose. At first, she would panic, sending messages, trying to pull him back. But over time, she realized that her worth did not depend on his emotional availability. The next time he pulled away, she didn't plead. She simply said, "I care about this connection, but I don't chase after someone who's not ready to meet me. I'll be here if you choose to return with presence." Then she let go. Days later, he returned, not because she pushed, but because her boundary revealed her value. She had not punished him, but she had made her position clear. Her silence held more power than any speech could have. This form of self-expression requires a kind of emotional maturity that few cultivate. It means you no longer speak from fear. You no longer beg to be seen. You no longer negotiate your standards for temporary comfort. You speak when necessary, and you trust that your presence carries your message even when you are silent. The wisdom of the East often teaches that water is the strongest element, not because it resists, but because it yields with strength. A woman who speaks with that same energy flows around resistance, but she is never diminished by it. Her presence is like still water, clear, deep, and steady. She allows a man to meet her there or not at all. When a woman speaks with energy, her truth is undeniable. When she sets boundaries from stillness, her dignity is untouchable. And in that state, she no longer tries to control how others perceive her. She knows who she is. She knows what she brings. She knows that connection cannot be forced and respect cannot be requested. It must be evoked by the way she lives and the way she leads herself, especially in love. When a woman masters the way she communicates, not just through her words, but through her energy, her silence, her reflection, and her boundaries, she no longer seeks approval, she radiates presence. She no longer negotiates her worth. She embodies it, and in this embodiment she becomes a force that is not loud but undeniable. She doesn't compete for attention. She draws respect by the depth of her stillness and the clarity of her intent. The path of the high-value woman is not about control, manipulation, or performance. It is about inner mastery. It is about speaking less but meaning more, asking deeper questions, not louder ones, listening not to respond but to witness, and choosing presence over performance, boundaries over blame, energy over effort. In love as in life, the woman who knows herself deeply becomes magnetic, not because she is perfect, but because she is real. And in a world of noise, realness is rare. That is her power. That is her voice. That is her home.